Hello everybody and welcome back to Animated Talk. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about The Little Drummer Boy, the 1968 Rankin Bass special. It's something that I watched today with my son, and it's kind of an interesting film in that it's kind of a mid-tier film for Rankin Bass. It's not one of their greats like, you have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Frosty is a very popular special, but it's not in the lower tier that most people don't really look at, like Cricket on the Hearth, which I've talked about recently on here. It's kind of a mid-tier in that I think a lot of people enjoy the fact that it does talk a little bit more about the biblical side of Christmas, but of course there are other people that are not Christian, and so they're not finding that aspect of the special that interesting. And so some people find it more interesting than others. Also, there are some people that find the more serious tone of it to be kind of awkward for Rankin Bass. And it definitely does have a more serious tone. The film is definitely trying to get to the emotional side of this particular character and give some emotional resonance to the little drummer boy playing the drum. Instead of him just being some kid that sees the baby and decides to start drumming, they try to give him a backstory as to why he's there and why it means something that the little drummer boy is playing. It's a very dark film. From the beginning, you get to see this little kid loses his parents. They're basically killed by people that are coming in and robbing their home and burning their house down. And then he's taken advantage of by these thieves in the desert. And of course, he also watches as one of his animals gets trampled. So it's very dark. And throughout the vast majority of the runtime, it's so dark that I think most people are kind of turned off by it. And honestly, as I was watching it, I was pretty turned off. There are a few songs in there, but there's definitely nothing that is nearly as memorable as like Silver and Gold or any of the songs really from Rudolph. So you start losing interest, but then you get to the end where you have the interaction with the biblical family in the nativity scene. And it actually does have quite a bit of resonance. Even though the kid up to this point is kind of a downer and he's just kind of a grumpy little kid, which is understandable given his backstory, but it's been pretty unpleasant up to this point, and you're losing interest. Once you do see him, though, before the King of Kings, he has a definite... there's much more emotion in that than would be normal, and the beauty of him seeing beauty in humankind again actually does come through. So I actually like too the fact that the lamb gets trampled, and of course there is the biblical symbolism of the lamb that's being kind of sacrificed there before the little baby, kind of talking about what Christ would do later on in the biblical story. So it's a very, it's touching. It was more touching than I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to say that it's necessarily a great film. Honestly, up through about, 18, 19 minutes of it, I was pretty bored, and it was pretty bumming me out, and I was ready to turn it off. But it gets better there towards the end. So I do think that it pretty much accomplishes what it sets out to do. Now, the animation is very choppy here, and it's pretty much in the Rankin Bass style, but in other specials like Rudolph, this is kind of circumvented a bit by the fact that it's, kind of Santa Claus characters, you have the abominable snowman that moves jerky, but that's okay because we don't really know how a snowman moves. When Rudolph is kind of jerky and having that kind of interesting puppet style, we don't know how a reindeer moves. And all the elves and stuff are very kind of toy-like. In this particular special, though, it's almost all human characters, and so the kind of jerky, awkward animation is kind of weird. And it does kind of show through here a little bit more the limitations of this particular animation style. And so I think the animation here doesn't really work nearly as well. Also, on top of it, the fact that sometimes the animal characters that he's interacting with don't seem to be very real because of the fact that the human characters seem to have a little bit more attention placed on them in this film. I think the animal characters don't really hold much emotional resonance for us. So when the lamb gets run over, we don't really care until the little boy has the emotional scene before the manger, and then it takes on more significance. But the animals themselves don't really grab at your heartstrings like Rudolph maybe does. So I don't think the animation's done nearly as well here, but at the same time, again, it is a harder bit of animation because they're using human characters. So at the end of the day, I have mixed feelings on the special. It's not a great one. It's not one that I'm going to sit and watch much more, maybe once or twice more in my life. Maybe I'll sit down and watch it. But in general, it's kind of boring, and it is really negative for the most part. But it does bring it around at the end, and it is nice for those people that do want to talk about the original Christian side of the story of Christmas, that they have an opportunity to in a special like that. So I guess because of that, it does have a little bit more emotional resonance. So hopefully this review helps you make a decision whether or not you're going to watch the special. Hopefully you've enjoyed the fact that we've talked about a lot of Christmas stuff recently here on Animated Talk, and hopefully you'll keep coming back to talk about more cartoons and other forms of art with me here. Bye-bye, everybody.